Thank you, that's great. Can everybody hear me okay? Great, excellent. My name is Fred Turner. I'm the chair of the Department of Communication here at Stanford, and it is my pleasure and my honor to welcome you here to the 51st Carlos Kelly McClatchy Symposium. As some of you will know, Carlos McClatchy was a soldier, an editor, a builder of American journalism, very much the kind of fighter that we need now. And it is such a treat to walk around this room and to walk around the cocktail room before, meeting folks who are living lives in that mold. We have in our community here tonight journalists, journalists in training, journalism faculty. It's really quite a wonderful group to be a part of, and I thank you all for being here. I want to extend a special thanks to Susan McClatchy, who is here with us. Susan, will you raise your hand? Thank you. Susan has been a constant and steady benefactor for our department and for the work we do with journalism. We are housed in McClatchy Hall, and she's really just been a wonder for us, supporting our research, our teaching, our journalism, and we're very, very grateful. Thank you. Great. I'm also excited to be here because our department has been undergoing, I think, a real renaissance in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, under the leadership of Professor Jay Hamilton, Jay, will you raise a hand? Very modest, wouldn't otherwise reveal himself. And with substantial support from the university, we've been transforming our journalism program at Stanford into a leading center for training journalists in the mix of computational and investigative skills that will sustain the business in the future. We've built a world-class journalism faculty, invested in cutting-edge technologies, and begun building collaborations with leaders in technology and journalism across campus and across Silicon Valley, as you'll see tonight, around the world. We're working especially closely with the JSK Journalism Fellowships, led by Don Garcia. Don, where are you? Yeah, there you are. Thank you. Great. And the JSK Fellowships bring mid-career journalists who are literally changing the world. Some of them are here tonight. How many of you are Knight Fellows? Just raise your hands if you guys are Knight Fellows. Excellent. Thank you, Knights. Great. We have representatives of our computer science department, of the engineering school, and of various Valley firms. It's just really nice to have you here. The person we should thank most of all here tonight is our own Janine Zakaria. Janine is the Carlos McClatchy visiting lecturer. She came to us from Jerusalem, where she was the Jerusalem bureau chief and Middle East correspondent for the Washington Post. On a personal note, I will never forget sitting with one of my colleagues, watching a report that she was giving there as tear gas was spewing in the background. I thought, yeah, we can get her here. She has reported from throughout the Middle East. She has served as the chief diplomatic correspondent for Bloomberg News, based in Washington, D.C. as well. She has traveled around the world with Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and others. She's a model of the kind of foreign correspondent we hope to train here. She's tech savvy, she's world savvy, and on another personal note, she is a simply fabulous teacher. I think you go ahead and just cheer for that. Every year that I've been here, someone has come to me in one of my undergraduate classes and said, "Do you know Professor Zakaria?" And I say, "Yes." She says, "She's amazing." It's just wonderful. We are very lucky to have her here, and the floor is hers. Thank you.
Do I gotta turn this?
Good. And the panelists. How about my props? Yeah. So we're gonna have to multitask. In Silicon Valley, we can do it, right? Eat and listen.
Boy, girl, boy, girl.
Boy, girl, boy, girl.
Yeah.
Will? Thanks.
Janine tells you to do it, you do it.
Welcome, everyone. How's everybody doing? All right. Thank you, Fred, for that warm and embarrassing introduction. So even though I teach my students, many of whom are here, raise your hands, students, former and current, my rock star students, I generally teach them not to start with a quote. No quote leads. Do you guys like quote leads? Never, never. See? Confirmation. But I'm going to break my own rule. All right? Quote, "The average American reads very little of the foreign news published in his favorite newspaper. The level of knowledge about important events abroad is very low. He would not like to see national and local coverage reduced to allow his newspaper to print more foreign news." Now, if it weren't for the phrase "published in his favorite newspaper" with the print reference and that, what is that, a masculine possessive? Yes, grammar teachers. You might say it could have been published today. But it's actually from a 1953 study by the International Press Institute on American habits of consumption of foreign news. Now, back then, there were several reasons why readers gave why they didn't pay much attention to international news. Among the top ones were, 1, remoteness of foreign events from one's own life. They said his. I'm changing it to 1. Okay. 2, don't understand it. Too complicated. 3, anybody want to guess?
Who cares?
Boring. Too busy was number 3. So, less than 1 in 3 Americans back in 1953 felt it was generally desirable for people to keep informed on world affairs. I was pretty struck by that. I have this romantic notion that back in the 50s everybody wanted to know about the world, but apparently they didn't value it that highly. And the average American spent, anybody want to guess how many minutes reading the newspaper in 1953?
20.
Good, Fred. 18 and a half minutes. 18. That's why he's the chair. 18 and a half minutes reading the newspaper, and how much of that on foreign? 2.3 minutes. Now, what did the readers say would make him or her more inclined to read more international news? News written in a more simple and understandable way, more pictures, more human interest, better presentation, and a headline that had a word like American or US and not some country they never heard of. So what was striking to me while reviewing this text as I was preparing the new foreign correspondence class that I'm teaching here this spring is that how similar this is to what readers actually, or what we think they want now. And that we as reporters and editors struggle with to how to answer those desires. Big fonts, single character narrative, more photos, more video, catchy headlines you're going to want to click on. But is it all enough, the question I'm interested in, and I hope you are too, to get people reading international news? And this leads me to the core question for the evening. How do we ensure that Americans consume important stories from abroad in an age when people are increasingly siloed in their own social media feeds? Media organizations broadly, not these ones, but broadly aren't committing the resources they once did for robust, sustained foreign coverage. And when increasingly large swaths of the globe have become too dangerous to work in, not only because American journalists are killed inadvertently, but because they're targeted for assassination. And so with that major question, we think a lot here in the department and in my class about what are the right storytelling techniques to reach people, to get them to read these stories. How do you overcome compassion fatigue? This is, I think, a topic that will be of interest to a lot of people here from the foundations and from the different departments on a story like the Syrian refugee crisis. And to go back to that 1953 study, how do we make these stories feel less remote? How do we explain the world in an effective way when only 36% of Americans can find North Korea on a map? Or when a presidential candidate last year didn't know what Aleppo was, right? These have been the core questions we've been thinking about in our class this quarter. And all of the students in foreign correspondence have had a core challenge, and they're here tonight. Find an underreported story from abroad, and using all the storytelling tools we teach you in this, and the professors are here, that we teach you in the Stanford journalism program, tell that story in the most effective way to make it go viral among your peers. Because I don't believe that we can have a functioning democracy if people don't know about the world in 2017. So that's been the core challenge, and everybody's experimenting. We're here in Silicon Valley. Do we use Snapchat? Do we use Instagram? We had a whole thing about Instagram in the class. I won't go into it. Anyway, you can ask a student. Podcasts, virtual reality. What do we need? What are the right tools? And you know what? It turns out that you guys, how many people are between the ages of 18 and 32 in this room? You guys are not uninterested in the news. You may not pick up a New York Times hard copy like I do, and I love it with all my heart, right? And you may not go directly to the BuzzFeed website, or you may not turn on NPR necessarily, but 88% of you receive news from Facebook regularly. But do millennials care about foreign or international news? Well, Vice CEO Shane Smith said back in March, quote, "When we started news, it was a given that millennials didn't give a damn," and I'm substituting the word there for the purpose of it. You can figure out what it was, about news, and they sure as hell didn't care about international news. So what did Vice do? They got rid of the inauthentic anchor. Instead, when you watch one of these broadcasts online, which I don't know if anybody's watched Vice, some of you watch it? A little bit, Jerry, yeah. I like it. It's the stories, they swipe away on the screen. How? Quote, like dating choices on the Tinder app. They cover serious topics, though, like immigration, politics, and human rights. And they've led newscasts on things like Duterte's crackdown in the Philippines. And they get 500,000 viewers a night. And they get 3 million on their Friday night show. So this dispels the notion that people can only have the attention span, what was that thing, of a bumblebee? Like 15 seconds? We have a longer attention span, maybe. Now, to cover all these issues around the globe, you need reporters. Aggregators need content to curate and comment on. And here the decline is obvious. I remember when I was based in Israel in the 90s for Reuters, and there was Beit Agron, and it was this building downtown for the print media. And God, did I want to be there when I was a student. God, did I want to work there someday. And you'd go in there, and there was the office for the Miami Herald, and the Hartford Courant, maybe, Deb, Mike, I don't know, they had the Baltimore Sun for sure. There may have been the San Jose Mercury News. And when I went back for the Washington Post in 2009, I think that was a wine shop. And people were working from their homes, and there was a handful, even on the Israel story, there was only a handful of people. Now, in 1991, the LA Times had, as a typical story, 28 full-time foreign correspondents, numbers that held up pretty well until 2004. Today there are 6. And even the majors, like my former employer, the Washington Post or the New York Times, who still contribute resources to this arena, one reporter covering a continent of Africa maybe, or one reporter covering Latin America. And tell me the last time you saw an international story on cable news that wasn't about Trump and Russia. When was the last time? Or even the nightly news, or whatever. I mean, when did they even do it anymore? I don't even know. Just 2 weeks ago, Condoleezza Rice sat right here in she had a comfy chair. I didn't want to do the comfy chairs. They had the Oprah chairs, but she sat in a Oprah chair, and she launched her book about democratic institutions, her book launch. And she wrote, and she asked a question, she got asked a question about, given the context of our times, why didn't we understand Russia? What did we get wrong about Russia? And it was interesting how she answered it. She started reflecting on her time back in the George H.W. administration, and she said, quote, "I used to go to the Soviet Union a lot as a young Soviet specialist, and especially as the Gorbachev era was unfolding, I would first go see the journalists, people like Phil Taubman, who teaches here, Felicity Beringer, or Bill Keller, because they knew the place, and they could get out places where American diplomats couldn't." And just a little bit of an advertisement. I didn't tell her to say this. She just did it. I hope that when those decisions are being made in newsrooms these days, that they're actually investing in people who can be out in these countries and know them. Well, joining us tonight are 3 international editors who are actually guiding those investments. To my immediate left are Will Dobson, the international editor for NPR, who previously worked, among other jobs, as Slate's Washington bureau chief, managing editor of foreign policy. He was senior editor for Asia at Newsweek and the author of the rather timely book, The Dictator's Learning Curve, Inside the Global Battle for Democracy. To his left is Miriam Elder, world and national security editor for BuzzFeed. She literally created the world desk. There was no world desk. There was no world coverage at BuzzFeed before her. And I guess Ben Smith tapped you how long ago? 6 years ago?
Oh, 3.5.
3.5 only. Feels like they have such, she'll tell us about their presence. She was previously a longtime Moscow bureau chief for The Guardian and worked at AFP at the International Herald Tribune in Paris. And finally, Michael Slackman, the international editor for the New York Times. He was formerly the deputy international editor, a longtime foreign correspondent for the New York Times, the LA Times, and my hometown newspaper, Newsday, back in the day, primarily in Egypt, but also Moscow, Berlin, the entire Middle East, basically, right, from Morocco to Iran. You have the fuller bios on your tables, which thank you to Mark Dizzuti for laminating them and making everything look beautiful tonight. And I hope you guys saw the name tags and the little bios on the back. That was all thanks to Mark for putting that together. So before I turn it to the questions, it's a little clarification on how this is going to go and a disclaimer. So we're going to lead a discussion here for about 45 minutes. You all have index cards on the table with pencils. So when you have a question that comes to mind, please feel free to jot it down. And my colleague Vignesh, where are you? We'll collect them around 7:25 and give them to me around 7:30. And we'll wrap sharply at 8, I hope. Although it might be too interesting. We might, I don't know. I try to wrap sharply. Now the disclaimer. The biggest story in our world right now, I'm aware of it. Okay. In our nations, in our lives, in our subconscious, in our sleep, is President Trump, and specifically the investigation into Russia's interference into our election and possible collusion between his campaign and the Russians. This week's Time magazine cover, it's amazing that it still exists, right? Apropos of the evening. Has anybody seen the image of the Kremlin? What is it? The White House literally morphing into the Kremlin.
It's not the Kremlin. It's St. Basil.
Sorry, thank you for my Russia experts up here. Not the Kremlin. Okay. Well, anyway, you get the idea. So I know this is a tantalizing story of enormous interest to everyone in this room, and we could spend the whole night just talking about this. We had a whole panel here in February about covering Trump, how journalists should do that, and you can watch that online. Luckily for you, when you go home tonight, you can put on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever your cup of tea, and you're going to hear nothing but that. That doesn't mean we're not going to talk about it, but one of the things that I find completely aggravating as a journalist and now an educator is the magnitude of the Trump story crowding out just about everything else on the planet. And so as the instructor of foreign correspondence, as the moderator of tonight's panel, I'm going to take the prerogative to try and talk about other important issues. And if Trump, I have a Trump question, don't worry, and you can use your cards for Trump, but it's not going to be only Trump, okay? So with that, let's start the discussion. The event is called Under Threat, the Future of Foreign Correspondence, to, of course, highlight both the physical dangers of international reporting, but also the financial stresses that jeopardize sustained international reporting. And with that in mind, I want to ask sort of provocative question. Why do we need foreign correspondence in an era when international reporting, in some cases, has become so dangerous that you can't send people? It's so expensive, and when there's this notion that everybody's a reporter now, you got a phone, you can do it, you can rely on foreign, people, you don't really need them. What is the importance of this? Who wants to take that first? You can use it to say whatever you want, actually. It's kind of an initial question to let you, Talking about the mission of the Times foreign desk, or international desk, sorry.
Well, international desk. We've had this discussion a couple times today. Foreign versus international. So I prefer the concept of international news, and when you talk about international news, are you talking about climate change? Because that's pretty international news. Are you talking about income inequality? Pretty international news. How about trade? We talk a lot about trade. That's international news. Immigration, migration, assimilation, issues of identity, that's what international reporting is. It is true that foreign correspondents roam the world and tend to go to conflict zones, but the issues and ideas that they're writing about are central to what is happening to people here. We live in an increasingly flattened out, interconnected world, and anybody who thinks they can kind of pull up the drawbridges and only focus on domestic issues to the exclusion, or build a wall, say, to the exclusion of the people, the rest of the world, are deluding themselves. The New York Times, BuzzFeed, NPR have doubled down on that notion, that to be a good citizen, you need to be aware of what's happening around the world. So I would say the notion of foreign correspondency itself is kind of a misnomer.
Well, that's what's interesting. Over lunch, it came up that we were speaking incorrectly, talking about my whole class has to be renamed, Jay. It's got to be international reporting because of this notion. What did you say, Will? That this notion that journalists are stuck in this idea of geography and it limits them, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I agree with everything that Michael said. You know, when you're looking at, I mean, I'll give an example. I was recently in Mexico and I was meeting with Mexican government officials, and we're talking about he who shall not be named, and we were talking, you know, and you know, this was a really interesting time to be talking to Mexican government officials because of what they find, the situation they find themselves in, and I was trying to probe sort of like, well, how are you? What is your approach? You know, at this point they were, you know, a month and a half in to the new administration, and you know, what struck me was that they weren't thinking about some sort of grand diplomatic bargain. They weren't even talking about Washington, D.C. What they were beginning to pinpoint was that there were a number of different Republican governors around the country who are in, you know, agricultural states that had a strong, you know, trade relationship with Mexico, and you know, some would say that's the better approach. It's better if maybe we don't make the case to the Trump administration. It might be better if a governor from some of the border states or from Iowa, for example, makes the case about corn or soybean production and what it would mean if this wall were to actually happen. And so the point being is that they were understanding that it was actually a local issue in local places that would be able to solve the international, the quote unquote international problem. And so, you know, if that's the way that you know, governments and government officials are thinking, you know, it's also, it just, you know, sort of bespeaks of sort of the nature of the problems and the issues that we're writing about and reporting on. You know, journalists, I would say, if I have a critique, I think that there has been a tendency, and one thing that has been very important to me since coming to NPR is to have more of our correspondents working together on stories. It's wonderful that NPR has as many international bureaus as it does, 17 right now, but you know, in our own reporting, we have and we can do more to illustrate the interconnectedness of these issues by having the correspondent in London working with the correspondent in China and telling the story collaboratively together, because not only does it make for great storytelling, but also begins to educate audiences as to exactly how these national borders don't really factor into how a story or an issue will be told or solved.
And Miriam, that was really your guiding principle, right, when you set up BuzzFeed, in a way?
Yeah, so we started the foreign desk about 3.5 years ago. Sorry, the world desk, actually, 3.5 years ago. And since we're an online-only publication, we and all our journalists and editors and everybody who works at BuzzFeed really lives on the internet, which is, I think, the way that you know, most people live today, especially the next generation. So we were thinking about how people identify with each other, and it's not just about having a correspondent in Mexico that covers Mexico and Central America, but we also started a bunch of thematic correspondent positions, which I'm particularly proud of. We have a global women's rights correspondent who was based in Nairobi for a long time. She just moved to Berlin to focus more and more on the refugee issue out of there, but she still, you know, she lives on a plane, she flies all over the world. We have a global LGBT rights correspondent who we started that position shortly after marriage equality was passed in the US, also thinking that all that like activist energy that was focused on achieving certain things in the US would be oriented abroad, which is precisely what happened with the gay propaganda law in Russia and stuff like that. And then, you know, all issues from cyber war to God knows what. These are things that cross borders and don't just exist within national confines. It's been fun.
Can I say one more thing on this point?
Yeah. Well.
So if I can just, because we're in the industry and we tend to talk about things pragmatically, about stories and how we cover stories, but let's frame this much more broadly. You know, we're in an era that they speak about, we're in a post-truth era. We're in an era when we're trying to divine facts from non-facts, fake news, right? What is the mission, really, of foreign correspondency? Foreign correspondency is about understanding perspective. It's about understanding language, which is super important, and it's about understanding different people's context. right? There's no way for us to begin to understand each other. I mean, we're having trouble as Americans understanding each other because we're insisting our truth is the truth and not recognizing someone else's truth. Globally, that's even more complicated. And that's one of the things that, one of the core missions of a foreign correspondent, to try to tell you how what you are doing and what you are seeing is perceived through the perspective of someone whose life experience is very different. I think it's a really noble mission, and it's essential for self-governance and a democracy to understand the world.
So I want the audience to recognize that these three news organizations are actually organizations that are investing in this kind of coverage as opposed to the cutbacks, but it's very expensive and it's very mission-oriented. How are you able to do it? Like, why is it prioritized by the news organizations that you work for? Maybe for the Times it's obvious, Michael, I don't know, but, or maybe not. I mean, you had cutbacks in other areas too. I mean, Will, why does NPR?
I mean, the NPR story is kind of interesting. I mean, you started off by sort of talking about this golden age that maybe didn't actually exist. I think that's also, I think many people probably could be forgiven for thinking that NPR has had this very long and storied international reporting tradition. Well, it's true that international reporting has been important to NPR for a long time, but if you go back 20, 25 years ago, there were about 5 international bureaus. And so it's actually, NPR sort of has been very against the grain. It's been since the late 1990s, really at precisely the time that many others were drawing down, that NPR began to expand its international presence. And so it's been a steady growth where, you know, in the early 90s, you would have found that we had bureaus in London, Tokyo, Mexico, Rome, and Jerusalem. And now, you know, it's Islamabad and Rio and, you know, and you know, many more. And I think in part that's because there were a number of different aspects to it. One, it was, you know, it was our belief that this was an excellent way to differentiate yourself. That in fact, the drawdown from others was actually an opportunity. Beyond that, also, our audiences rewarded us for it. I mean, you know, from the point of view of what our audiences are looking for, we've gotten steady feedback that they deeply appreciate our news gathering operation overseas. That when it comes to, I mean, it's certainly been frustrating for me for much of my life. Professionally, I'd go to a cocktail party and I'm working at Newsweek or I'm working in foreign policy, I'm working wherever, and I'm working really hard to bring people international news, and all I ever hear at the cocktail party is, well, you know what I heard on NPR the other day? I'm like, you know, somebody else is doing some work here besides NPR, and so at some point, you know, I decided to just join them. But you know, but the reality is like, you know, there was this deep interest, and so I think that right now it's far more likely that we will open up another bureau than we would draw down.
Miriam, are you seeing the interest in BuzzFeed? I mean, there was interest. You had the idea to start it, so.
Yeah, absolutely. There's interest. I mean, like I think it's hard. It's difficult for me to engage with statements like, "Do millennials care about foreign news or international news?" We really think about who's reading our stories, depending on the story. So we think about potential audience for every single story that we publish. But I think, you know, it's more important than ever for many reasons. And one of them, I know we get distracted with Trump. I'm gonna just go right out there and say his name. But
You're allowed to say it. I just didn't want it to be the whole night about Trump.
But you know, there's a lot of stuff that started under Obama as well, and you know, the United States has been engaged in secret wars, basically, for years and years and years. And if we didn't have correspondents out in the field, these are things that we just simply wouldn't hear about. We've had correspondents in Istanbul now for more than 3 years, reporting on Syria, reporting on Iraq. One of them got a scoop the other day. A source sent him photographs of U.S. Special Forces operating in southern Syria, a part of the country that the Pentagon has never talked about. We published these stories, and it revealed to the world that U.S. soldiers are in a part of the world that you would never even think that they would be. And this is the kind of thing that's just, I think, more and more essential the more and more secretive that government gets. And again, it's getting worse and worse under Trump, but it's a trend that we've seen for far too long.
Miriam, just to follow up, what did you say to me that BuzzFeed needs a reason not to publish? How does it go? Or more than a reason?
We're just going to dive into the dossier.
Well, let's just get it out of the way. Let's just get it out of the way. Let's just get it out of the way. I mean, in terms of, you don't have to relate it back to the dossier, but in terms of, I want to distinguish the thinking among 3 international editors on your instinct is to go, to publish those pictures, right? I mean, rather than to find a reason why it might not be the right thing or to do or something.
I mean, we have a discussion every time, and this is something in particular that happened a lot when ISIS was, just starting to commit its horrific atrocities and put out these propaganda videos and photographs, and part of what they were trying to do is to bring attention to what they were doing. But we live on the internet, and the discussion that we have is, well, these photos are absolutely everywhere, and where our readers are, they are on BuzzFeed, they're also on Reddit, they're also on Twitter, they're also on Facebook. So it becomes a question of can we curate this content and present it to them in a way that provides context? We can't pretend that this stuff doesn't exist.
Michael, did you want to add to that at all in terms of?
I think I think that to what in particular? I mean, this idea that there are things out there that we have to ask ourselves, should we publish? I think Dean Baquet's inclination, the executive editor of the New York Times, is always to publish, that sunshine and public discourse and making things public is always the antidote, always. It does get tricky when you're talking about unverified allegations. At what point does the existence and widespread knowledge of that allegation itself become news? And I think that was an important discussion that they had at BuzzFeed, and I wouldn't second guess them on that. We have had many of these discussions about ISIS propaganda, and there are places where I feel like we do have to draw a line, because it is not our mission, goal, or ambition to spread their propaganda, but where we can illuminate the context of what you're seeing. I think that's super important. It's hard because everything we're talking about is happening in a news ecosystem where everybody is getting hit with a fire hose of information all the time. There's no way to stop that, right? I mean, there's no way for me. We can't even begin to have the discussion of limiting that. So what do you have to talk about? You have to talk about creating consumers of news who are literate and understand their sources and understand what they're looking at. And to the extent that we can provide value added, and that's what we try to do. Does that answer?
Yeah. So can everybody hear, by the way? Yes, because it sounds muted to me, but it's fine in the back. Okay, good. So everybody's had a long career on these issues, and I just wanted to ask each of you, what is new now in 2017 in terms of your perspective on international reporting? Michael, you told me when we were talking before the event that, a few years ago when you became international editor, the question to the correspondent would be, is this a news story? Is the story that the reporter would pitch the idea, and then it would say, he would say, is it a news story or a feature? Is it an anecdotal lead? Now it's a million other things. Is it visual? Is it first person? Is it VR? What are we doing? So that's on the storytelling side, but more broadly is what's new about international reporting right now?
Well, it's a couple of things. First of all, correspondents used to have the best life in the world because their bosses were in a different time zone and could only reach them once a week. Now they're tethered. I mean, I remember when I got my first cell phone, it was exciting for about 10 minutes until I realized, oh shit, they can call me. What you were talking about, Janine, isn't unique to foreign correspondency, though. It's really something that news organizations like the New York Times, legacy print organizations have wrestled with, and I think now have come to fully embrace this idea that we now have many tools available to tell a story. And the question is always, and this is what we were talking about, what's the best way to tell the story? What is the best way to convey what is happening to a particular audience? Sometimes that will be with a 7,000 word, deep dive narrative, immersive reporting narrative. Sometimes it will be with a podcast. Sometimes it will be with a story where the visuals drive the narrative and the text is written to the pictures. Sometimes it will be a multimedia piece. We have a piece up, I think it was yesterday, about our correspondent in Iran who drove across the country and took video and there's some text, and he took some pictures. So it's kind of an exciting time because it can be daunting also. But we have, as the New York Times, as BuzzFeed, as the Washington Post has been great at this, many, many new tools to tell stories, many ways to reach readers. I mean, one of the things you talked about is empathy fatigue. So when you have a story that is, you know it's important, you know it matters, you know lives are affected, what is more central to our mission as journalists but to write about that? But when you write about it day after day after day and years go by, the reality is, if it's something like the migration crisis, people drowning in the Mediterranean, barrel bombs being dropped in Aleppo, our readers become somewhat inured to it, our audience, excuse me. Because it's the, so how can we re-engage the public in issues that matter, get them to pay attention, and sometimes that's a visual first story. That was the case with Aleppo. It was certainly the case with the migration issue. You could write a 400-word story about 1,000 people having drowned in the Mediterranean trying to cross from Africa to Europe. Or you can show one photograph of one little boy whose body is drowned and washed up on the beach and everybody pays attention. You know, that's well, not the boy, but the tools available to us, it makes it very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all very true. I'd say there are two ways in which it's changed, in particular, that jump out to me beyond sort of the storytelling. I mean, to that, the way I think about what Michael was just saying is that it's, there's more of a necessity on, it's not changing how we tell stories to some degree. Great storytelling is great storytelling, and I think it's as powerful to a 16-year-old as it is to a 65-year-old. But what we have to become better at doing, and it's a challenge I think across newsrooms, is delivering that story in a way that is responsive to people's behaviors, the way in which they want to consume the story. So, for many of people in the audience that we're trying to reach, they are going to listen to that story with earbuds on, not in their vehicle. Their commute changed. Are we going to ignore that? Well, we ignore that to our detriment. The other ways in which it's changed, I think, one, at this particular, I think this is true broader than just in the last 18 months, but it's certainly acute right now, is that there is a deep desire for facts. Facts matter in a deep, deep way. It's the intellectual gymnastics of argumentation, I think, are less interesting and feel a little bit like a dividend that we were, something, an indulgence we could enjoy at a less wrought moment. But at this moment, people want to understand when, who, where, and then we can also get into the why. But I mean, I think facts matter a great deal, and we've seen that in our own reporting. And then the other way it's changed is that this work is far more dangerous. It's far more dangerous than it has been in a long, long time. And that is something we have to respond to as well.
We'll come back to the danger question. Miriam, do you want to comment on sort of what's new from your perspective?
I mean, I think there's so many things, but if I had to choose just one, I think that for a really long time, being a foreign correspondent meant like being a white man and going out into the field and telling the stories of either other white men or like the natives and bringing it home. And what's really exciting to me is the diversity of both who's doing the foreign reporting, the subject matter of the foreign reporting, and the fact that there's engagement not just with the audience here in the United States, but the people that you're writing about. So you can't write a story these days about, Russia or Kenya or China or Ecuador without hearing from the very people that you're writing about. And I think that tends to make the reporting a lot richer.
So I recently sat in on a editorial, or I don't know if they call it A1 or whatever, news meeting at the San Jose Mercury News. And they had Chartbeat up on the screen. Where's Angel? Oh, yeah. They had Chartbeat. So for those of you who don't know what Chartbeat is, it's an analytics tools for publishers to measure reader engagement.
In real time.
Right, so as the stories are posting on the web. And my heart absolutely sank as I watched this thing happen. And there's an editor dedicated, of course, to this engagement function. And she said the number one story by far that day, whatever it was an actor committed suicide on Facebook Live. That was number one. Number two was where to get your free samples of McDonald's Big Mac special sauce in the Bay Area. And I don't remember what 3 was, but I can assure you it wasn't an international story. And so you have to make these decisions every day about stories that are important, that are mission-oriented, and that you're just going to do because they're important. But how do you decide what stories to report? How do you prioritize? How do you make room for stories like about the Rohingya, Will, where you just, I happen to know you committed a lot of resources, or to go to Antarctica? How do you make those storytelling decisions?
Can I just
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit on this Chartbeat thing?
Yeah.
So Chartbeat is a tool. It is one tool that helps us measure one thing in real time, right? And there's actually super cool and very legitimate uses to it. I'll give you one example. There are times when a story that we care about, that we've invested in, that has value, isn't performing well. So we change the headline, and you can watch it take off. And is that bad? No, I think that's great. Miriam said something earlier that is a fundamental change to what we all do. And it used to be that the reader was our secondary thought, or the audience was our secondary thought. Listen to what Will said. We want to give you your news when you want it, where you want it, how you want it, in the form that you want it. You're at the center of our universe. And that's a good thing. And Chartbeat is one tool used to measure that. Page views, clicks, engagement are different ways of measuring whether or not we are succeeding in reaching you. If you are only click-driven, if you only use it to say it's a race to the bottom to get the most clicks, then of course that's not a good thing. But I don't think anybody up here would advocate.
And by the way, no, and I'm not. Of course, I'm not advocating it. For me, the issue, the reason why we're all here is to have impact. You want to have impact. You want to educate, and you want to have
impact.
impact.
Why the headlines matter. Look how 80% of the millennials are getting news from Facebook, and they don't see context. They don't see how I've put a picture in all they see is a headline, right?
Can I hold up my thing, the picture thing? Look at this. Look what they did.
Not exactly Facebook.
No, but I'm saying they didn't see this, and I love it. So I want. Look at this. Look what they did. A special section.
I know, but show the
People
inside.
fleeing Boko Haram. Okay, look at this page. Look at this picture, Jerry. Look, where are you? Look at this. It keeps going, and it's like this enormous. Look at this thing. Look. This kind of work in Niger, sending them there, doing the work, right?
Yeah.
So
it's the
did it have the
largest
impact?
photograph the New York Times ever printed.
It's the largest ever? See? I
Look at it.
didn't even know that. Look. Okay. Anyway. This was in the New York Times.
Today?
Sunday, April 2nd. No, it was in my piles. But, okay. So, all right. The point is, in terms of prioritizing.
It got a lot of clicks, by the way.
What? Did it get clicks?
It got a ton of clicks online. It was cool.
All right, good.
Because you had this drone footage over the road. Anyway.
All right, prioritizing. Miriam, how do you prioritize?
In a couple of ways. I guess, really two. Like one, we really do listen to what people care about. Can I do a little sidetrack?
Of course, you can do it, yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in Russia, and I remain obsessed with Russia, and I'm particularly obsessed with their propaganda, including tools like Russia Today. How did Russia Today gain power in the United States? Because back in the day, there was something called Occupy Wall Street. BuzzFeed didn't exist at the time. And none of the legacy publications deigned to cover it because it was just some kids out in New York screaming for God knows what. Nobody covered it. Who covered it? Russia Today. They were there every single day, nonstop coverage. They filled a vacuum. If you don't listen to your audience, not only will you not win readers and inform people with the information that they want and need, but you will actually leave vacuums for your adversaries to fill. That's my sidetrack. So on the one hand, listening to your audience is really important just to win them, to have them as readers, as viewers, whatever, but also I think for strategic purposes. And then the other is really, it comes down to just good old news judgment. There's plenty of times where we publish stories that I know will not be read by hundreds of thousands or millions of people. The example that I give quite often is after Obama walked back his decision to bomb Syria after the chemical weapons attack, there was willful blindness in the United States to Syria. I think there was real active just shutting down, not wanting to hear about it, read about it, anything. we continue to publish stories, and what I think are really, really important stories. They were read maybe by like 30 or 40,000 people. I considered them successful because as long as I knew, and you could see this, on Twitter and where have you, as long as I knew that every Syria expert, everybody in DC, everybody in London and Brussels and in Istanbul that had to be reading the story was reading it, then it was successful. So it's a mix of both.
I want to follow up on the Syria point after, but Will, I want you to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with everything was said. I mean, I think there are some stories that you pursue them because no one else is. And that isn't going to be a traffic play, usually. It's going to be something that you feel is just newsworthy, and it's important that someone tells the story. We have people all around the globe, and we want to deploy them to places and tell stories, in fact, that won't be told otherwise. That's really important. And so, to some degree, it's become very challenging in this environment because there has been so much news. That's hard, so you really have to pick your spots. You have to sort of say, like, look, we can redeploy people in this way. I'm going to send more people to cover this story so as to create space someplace else on our team for someone to do, to spend 2 weeks in Bangladesh and get the story that we want to get there. And if what was the percentage? 32%, 33% can find North Korea. Try Bangladesh. I think to some degree there's a part of it that isn't science. There's part of it that is just sort of a mission-directed commitment to telling stories that deserve people's awareness and attention. And that's an ongoing negotiation without end.
So I want to shift a little to images. I want to talk about images broadly, video, photos, VR, whatever. And I was thinking about a story that actually Condoleezza Rice told me about when she walked into the Oval Office as, I think she was still national, well, she would have been Secretary of State maybe. And President Bush, George W. Bush, he held up a newspaper to her, and there was a photo of a child soldier in Africa holding a teddy bear and a gun. And he said, I'm the President of the United States. I don't want this to happen anymore. And in 2008, he signed a law that leaders of military forces and armed groups who had recruited child soldiers could be arrested and prosecuted in the United States. And I was struck by that because what if he hadn't seen that picture in the newspaper that day? Then we wouldn't maybe have that law. And I think a lot about images. And so this was the cover of the New York Times on Wednesday, April 5th, after the last chemical attack. And it's interesting to look at how the Times picked this photo, horrific as it is, compared to what the Wall Street Journal did, which had an even more horrific photo on the front page. It caused, we don't know, we could have a whole night on what, if that triggered President Trump to strike in Syria or whatever. But the photos, the point I'm trying to make is the photos have the impact. You made reference, Michael, to Island Kurdi, the 3-year-old baby who washed up. I get emotional even thinking about it because we have a 3-year-old. But, people reacted, but they reacted for a limited amount of time. And on the other hand, you can't keep bombarding people with these horrific images. So let's talk about the importance of images, of video, and all these things, and actually executing this mission we're talking about. How important is it?
I mean, yeah. It's an interesting question because the images that were broadcast out of Vietnam changed the course of the war. Think about what has happened in Syria. It is the most personal, most documented, in-your-face, horrific war in our lifetime, and we are flooded with images coming out of Syria from people looking in the camera saying, "Save me." Many of them, absolutely authentic. And what's been the result? The result has been, I think, to some extent, a continuation and extension of that empathy fatigue. So images can overwhelm. And then an Alan Kurdi will break through, or the boy pulled out of the rubble sitting on the back of the ambulance that will break through. Your question is, does it matter? Because ultimately people forget them? Yeah, sure. Again, I think it does. I think it does matter. I think it's essential to reminding people and bringing these issues back to the forefront. reminding people that lives are at stake, people are being killed. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a right answer. I mean, Miriam, how important are images on BuzzFeed's site?
Images are very important. I agree. I think there's a very long history of this from Vietnam, well, from the Civil War on, frankly. But I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time thinking that, is our job to get people to care? To what end?
Right, does that shift into advocacy, you mean, then?
Yeah, I don't know that I think that my job is to get people to care. I think my job is to inform people. I also,
But if they're not paying attention, how do you inform
well,
them?
but then that's the question, right? It's to me, I don't like to say that, millennials don't like to read about foreign news, or nobody likes to read about foreign news, or people would rather read about a suicide on Facebook than they would about foreign news. Then I'm doing something wrong. I don't want to deal in the realm of should. People should be reading about this. People should be caring about this. I think at that point it does come down to creativity, and sometimes that's images, and sometimes it's putting the attention elsewhere. I think it's bringing what we can do most at the end of the day, and maybe this is taking it out of the realm of foreign news, is putting it back on our own leaders and our own institutions, and making sure that we question them and know that they're the ones who have the ultimate responsibility to potentially do something here.
I don't know is the image question relevant for you as radio?
It is. I mean, we have photographers that are part of our news gathering, and but yes, and I think that for us, I mean, if you go back to the issue of sort of the fatigue factor, to some degree, then that means for us sometimes saying, well, wait a minute. And this happens where you're thinking through ways in which you're going to tell a story, and for us that doesn't mean always having it be told by us. It may mean finding a voice in Aleppo to speak directly to our audience, to have an interview with one of our hosts. So we've, in that way, when you're talking to the surgeon who refuses to leave Syria and stays, and his only movement has been from one bombarded hospital to another, that's very powerful, and it's something that doesn't need, it doesn't need an interlocutor, and so we can and often will opt for that sort of direct storytelling where it's one of our hosts reaching out, and it's actually quite powerful when it's the same person over a period of time, because we've been able to tell the story of disintegrating societies by going back to that same person every 2 to 3 months, and I think our audience responds to it.
Can I just go back to something I said earlier on this point? Remember I said the challenge we have with every assignment is asking ourselves what's the best way to tell the story? So climate change is best told through images. You can have a story, or you can see the ice shelf melting. You can see drone footage flying over a wasteland, like in that photograph. Mm-hmm. It is partly a climate change photograph also. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about war footage, it's about conveying to readers the complexity and the awesomeness of what's happening around you, I think.
And Michael,
sometimes it just entertains.
To take that one step further of the images, the New York Times is doing a virtual reality project every day. I know it's not all on the international desk, but maybe you could just talk about that, because that's a subject I know a lot of people in the audience are interested as well.
Our Samsung 360?
Yeah.
We do it every day.
Every day they have a VR. We do it every day.
We do one every day.
Okay, so moving on from that. No, but it's interesting because we are experimenting and teaching here about using spherical video to tell stories and finding that niche spot with Jeremy's help to guide us on which stories really merit that kind of storytelling. And we've actually found it's a pretty narrow field, actually, but when you do it, it can be quite powerful.
Look, we have all kinds of tools available to us now, right?
Yeah.
Video 360. I have my feelings about the journalistic merit in doing it every single day. But we started experimenting, for example, with Facebook Live. And I think in the beginning, we took a lot of heat. The production values were low. The journalistic content was questioned. Did it serve a mission, or was it strictly about, attracting millennials on Facebook? And I think eventually, we actually did figure it out. And we did figure out how to use live interactive journalism to engage an audience in a really productive and mission consistent way. And I'm very proud of the work that the team at the New York Times has done on what we call now live interactive journalism. And we're going to try to bring it onto our core website, homepage, whatever you call it, app. I don't know.
So
Platform.
Vignesh is going around collecting the questions, and so here he is. You may have noticed that you're all sitting at, well, you will have noticed that you're all sitting at tables named for historic foreign correspondents. Many are from decades past. A few died more recently, including Danny Pearl, a Stanford alumnus who was murdered in 2002 by militants while reporting in Pakistan, and our friend and colleague Anthony Shadid, who died of an asthma attack while he was in 2012 when he was crossing back covertly from a Syria trip into Turkey. And 2 months before Anthony died, he gave an interview to Terry Gross. This was shortly after he had been abducted with colleagues of his while reporting in Libya. And he said this: "I know I took risks to go into Syria," referring to an earlier trip he had taken to Syria, "and those risks felt warranted to me. I think Ajdabiya, which was where he was abducted in Libya, I got wrong. And I don't think Ajdabiya was as important as I thought it was at the time. And it came at a great cost, not just to us. I mean, we lived. I mean, our driver was lost in Ajdabiya." So I was wondering, because one of the things you have to do as an international editor, this is probably a big portion of your job, thinking about this, worrying about this. Can you talk about this safety question and the decisions you have to make about whether it's worth it to put a correspondent in that kind of environment? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, it's an enormous part of their job. I feel sometimes, I don't know, it's hard to quantify exactly, but I feel like these days, I feel like it's easily, you know, it feels like a quarter of my job, if not maybe more, a third of my job of sort of dealing with these situations. You know, there's a lot that can go into it in terms of, you know, the security briefings and the planning and the preparation, and you know, and then going back over how you intend for a trip to go and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is it's a ongoing risk benefit calculation, and that can mean in the broadest sense of should we go there. Is it time to go there? Is it too soon? But then also, and maybe much more importantly, on the day in question, on a day-to-day basis of, you know, and what's so key is the communication between the editor and the correspondents, that there's an understanding of, okay, this is what you're doing, this is what I understand you're doing today, how are you going to approach that? What is the point at which you know that you need to leave? And you know, these are very difficult situations. The editor isn't there. We put these people in these positions because we trust their judgment to a great degree. But that cuts both ways. I mean, for the correspondent who's less experienced, they may be taking on risks that they shouldn't. On the other hand, a correspondent who's been in the field for a long time and feels as though they've always made the right call, are they only ripe to finally make the wrong call? You know, it's a big worry. It's a big concern. And I do think that it's gotten, as I said earlier, I think it has gotten much worse. There was a time where it seemed like it was journalists coming under fire. It seemed as though it was more an unintended consequence of a conflict, a pre-existing conflict, whereas now it's so often the case that the journalists themselves are the target. And they will often be the only person in that position who is unarmed. And so how do you think through those contingencies? I mean, it's the type of thing where in the case of, you know, talking to one correspondent not long ago, you know, I said, look, you know, here's what we're willing to do, X, Y, and Z, but if you get to this point, it's really important that you know that you have our full support to not report the story. and that there's another way for us to do this. There's always another way to do it other than the way that we thought was the best way going in. So, let's pause, let's regroup, and then rethink it again. But yes, it's an enormous facet of the work we're doing now.
Anybody else want to add on that, or else we can shift to, you want to talk about the safety question, or?
The journalists working for Charlie Hebdo were in Paris. This is not just a question of conflict zones. In some ways, I know when someone's going into Iraq. I know when they're going into, well, we don't go into Syria. I mean, I worry about our correspondents in Turkey, to be honest with you. Look at what happened to the Wall Street Journal correspondent there. We've had to do security assessments in correspondents' homes around the world, in offices, to make sure that there are double locking systems and surveillance systems. I mean, think about it everywhere. Terrorism, violence, targeting of journalists is not the exclusive province of ISIS or Al-Qaeda, unfortunately, or certainly not within the geographic territory of Syria and Iraq. I worry about our correspondent who was just in Angola. I worry about, we have staff in Venezuela now, out on the streets, and the militias are opening fire into crowds. It's a very dangerous time to be a journalist, So we do all we can, as Will said, to weigh the journalistic mission versus the risk, to try to account for and minimize the risk, and make sure that we have procedures in place and protocols in place to prevent injury and to deal with injury in the event that it should happen. But it's a bad call. You don't want to get that call.
No, you don't want to get that call. And I mean, we require hostile environment training for not just all of our international correspondents, but for the editors too. Because although many of them will have had it before when they were correspondents, it's still the case that it's important to go through the course and refresh exactly what are the risks that the correspondents are taking, and so that you're at your best to have those conversations when you have to have them. We've recently had a correspondent who, was picked up and imprisoned in South Sudan, and so I got that call on a Saturday morning at 4 a.m. because he hadn't checked in. And so we had a protocol in place of check-ins, and the call didn't come. And we've learned that he'd been detained. And so it made for a really difficult 3 days. Fortunately, he was released ultimately. But it was a situation where this can happen at any time and anywhere. And I think Michael's exactly right. It's not, to some degree, you have your guard up when you've thought through everything or everything that you can when you're trying to report from Mosul. This is something that what's your contingency planning for the Korean Peninsula?
Can I just tell you one other thing that doesn't often come up when we talk about security, but the mental health of our correspondents is very important too. Conflict zone correspondents are often in more conflict zones than active duty personnel. And some of the things correspondents see when the Malaysian airliner flight was shot out of the air, we happened to have a correspondent very nearby, and she drove into the field of human debris and was so afraid she wouldn't be allowed out of there that she slept in her car that night. I'm talking, this is a passenger plane full that came down and was spread across the field in Ukraine. We had a correspondent who was in the Philippines after the typhoon blew through, and when the waters receded, the roads and landscape was littered with bloated bodies. It's a lot to deal with. He lost 12 pounds and had trouble sleeping. I mean, so we also are keenly aware of the mental and psychological stresses put on our correspondents, and encourage them both to be aware of the signs of PTSD and to seek help if they need it.
So one of the things I'm interested in spending some time on this topic is because I don't know that this audience will know, but I don't know if broader Americans appreciate the risks and that journalists take to do this kind of work. And it looks like the Times is actually making more of a push to show what it's like to be a reporter, like putting the focus on them. Every story has a story. Look what it's like to sneak across the border with the migrants. Like actually, and to me as a long time foreign correspondent, I found this very off-putting initially because it's really not supposed to be about you and your experience reporting the story, but that has become part of it. And Miriam, there's a question here about BuzzFeed's decision on this point on dangers. It's relevant when you decided to send someone in to cover Ebola. Mm-hmm. And so I thought maybe you could talk about that decision. It's another kind of risk. But also this whole discussion of things getting too dangerous, it's changed the market for freelancers and your ability to actually take copy from people like young journalists in this room may want to pitch. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's changed as well.
Sure. So Ebola was uniquely horrifying. I mean, every story is kind of uniquely horrifying in its own way, but the idea of sending somebody into a zone where such a highly contagious disease was spreading was a really difficult decision. And just like Will said, the last thing that I said to our reporter Gina Moore before she got on the plane was, you can decide at any moment before that plane takes off that you don't want to go. You can decide the second the moment the plane lands that you want to come back, so that the reporter always knows. Also for mental health reasons, that they have control over the situation, and we don't want to put somebody in a situation where they don't want to be. Also because that's where mistakes tend to get made. But at that point, it just became about planning potential evacuation if she felt that she got infected. Just trying to make sure that the infrastructure was there. To deal with the situation. It's hard to make blanket statements about what kind of risk you're willing to undertake. It's just something that's kind of a constant with every single story. And in terms of freelancers, we kind of have a principle that we don't take freelance work from hazardous environments. We don't want to encourage reporters to put themselves in danger. I think for a long time, dating back to like the wars in Yugoslavia and former Yugoslavia, reporters would go out there and just kind of sell what they could. But a huge thing has changed, which is the enemy, or the adversary, or the bad guys used to need us to tell their stories. I'm sure you guys have seen, like, it goes viral for some reason every 6 months or so. I don't know if he was working for the Indy then, but when Robert Fisk interviewed Osama bin Laden, and just imagine that happening today, a reporter going and interviewing the head of ISIS. They just don't need us anymore because they have Twitter, because they have YouTube. We just don't want to encourage any reporters to take that kind of risk without having the institutional support that you need.
So there's a question here about, and maybe this gets at the thing I said in the beginning, but what can news outlets, print, broadcast, whatever, do to use the 24-hour news cycle to cover more important and broader stories? We need and want to know about stories that matter versus this repetitious information 24 hours a day that we're getting on a certain subject.
Don't watch TV.
Don't watch TV, right? That's one way to do it. I mean, really, does anybody work for cable news in here? Oops. So cable news,
Safe space.
It's a safe space on video, on YouTube. It's talk radio on TV. And it's not your only source of news. It's just very present in our lives. And the truth is that you have these amazing news outlets doing this work. And then, as Will was pointing out earlier, if you're really interested in Venezuela, you can also, what was it called?
I mean, I was saying earlier at lunch today just that if you are really excited about, Phil Reeves reporting for NPR from Venezuela, or Nick Casey when he was there for the New York Times, if this is something that means a great deal to you, unlike an earlier time, there are other outlets you can go to that are focused just on that. So, for example, just to stick with the Venezuela example, Caracas Chronicles is an absolutely fantastic blog written by people who know Venezuela very well, by Venezuelans, and that will give you this sort of deep dive that you want to supplement what you're getting from outlets like our own. And that's true across the board. I mean, name the country or the issue, and there's these alternative places where you can get that additional context. And that's something that wasn't true before.
But I don't know, I mean, a millennial here asks, do you have any idea for attracting millennial more to international news? Because some people will do that, because this person writes they're rare in the news shared by friends and families, and even though we have access to the entire world, it doesn't necessarily mean people consume more international news. Yeah, I know you didn't like this question earlier, so you can tell me again that you don't like it.
I don't think it's necessarily bad that people are spending a lot of time reading about Trump and the Russia investigation. It's the biggest story in the world. It's the craziest thing. Like, so I don't know that I have this feeling that right now, people aren't reading about things that they shouldn't be reading about. This is legitimately an insane time in American politics, in the history of our entire republic. When it comes to getting people to be more engaged with different parts of the world, I think we try to do at BuzzFeed two things. One is either break news that matters also in the local context. So really engage with the politics of the places that you're covering. We try, although oftentimes we come in as outsiders, not always. In a lot of the places, I have people who are either dual nationals or nationals of the place. But try to engage with the local politics of the place and have a real respect for it, and have then a real respect for your readers who also want to engage with that and not just want to read about a faraway place that doesn't feel like it has any connection to the world that they know. And then the other way is really to tell very human stories. One of the most successful stories that we had last year, you won't believe it if I describe it. It was about a guy who at the age of 25 became the youngest ruler in the world in the 90s. He was the president of Sierra Leone. The guy has not been relevant for ages, but our reporter told this beautiful story of finding this guy who, found immense power at a very young age, and then now is, however old, like a drunk at the side of the road. This was like an 8,000 word story. And it was read by hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people because I think she connected with her subject in such a profound way and just told an ultimately human story. So that's kind of the way we try.
Can I say something? Yeah. This is an odd panel. I've never been on a panel where we've all agreed so much before. So if you don't mind, I'm going to disagree with something that she said. It is my job to make you care. Absolutely. That is why I'm in this. I want to make you care. I am not here to prescribe an outcome. I am not here to tell you what your opinion should be. But I want to make you care. And if you're a millennial and you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, I want you to. So how am I going to try to reach you? I'm going to partly do what Miriam said, which is come up with stories about people. I'm going to try to get you to look at the New York Times on Snapchat, which is what we're doing now. We're versioning stories on Snapchat that may be more accessible to you. It's partly about building brand. It's partly about driving people to our main site. It's good business, but it's also at that core of what we do, which is to make you care about what's going on in the world around you. Look, we just did a story about the new First Lady in France. Okay, she's kind of an interesting person. I think she's in her 60s. Her husband is 39. She was his high school teacher. It's interesting. There's important issues of gender and male-female roles, and who knows what happened in high school. The story did really, really well. It reached easily over a million readers. We did a story. Ben Hubbard went to Saudi Arabia last year. He's an extraordinary correspondent. He's an Arabist, fluent in Arabic. And Ben I made him spend 3 months in Saudi Arabia. I said, I want you to tell people what it is like in Saudi Arabia. And so the traditional way, and what we learn in journalism school, and what we all aspire to, is tell these beautiful narratives where you have a character and you follow the arc of the story through the character. Impossible in Saudi Arabia. Impossible, because you can only get so close to people. They will not introduce you often to their families. In many cases, they won't bring you into the homes. Ben's experience over 3 months with every door closing in front of him became the vehicle to tell the story. This is a big change. So Ben became the vehicle for explaining to you what it is like to be in Saudi Arabia. Ben meets the head mufti in Saudi Arabia, and he says to him, this is the highest the highest religious official in Saudi Arabia. And the guy says to him, so do you want to convert? And he says, no, I'm Christian. And basically what the guy says, there's no legitimacy to Christianity. How do you use that? In the past, it would have been very difficult because it happened to the correspondent, but it's an extremely telling moment. That story, it was a long story, a traditional story. We didn't even have great art to go with it, not great images. Hugely powerful story that got a lot of readers. I can't tell you that young people read it, but I do know it was very, very widely read. So
sometimes you don't know what's going to take.
Yeah, sorry.
So this is a sort of an easy.
That's exciting.
It's exciting. I'm very. I wasn't
Mix it up
excited that
a
Ben
little
Hubbard had to
bit.
live in Saudi Arabia for 3 months, so that's give
Yeah,
him a raise for that.
this
Okay,
year,
What's the, okay, so this is a question. What's the international, I love this. What's the international story that Americans ought to care more about or know more about, depending on which side of this divide you're on, but we don't because we don't know enough about it. Or it's just. So I'll tell you, we had a guest come to our class from Sudan, and we asked him this very question, and he immediately said, oh, no doubt, Central African Republic. Going to have a genocide there, no one's paying attention, least reported, most underreported, very important, no one's paying attention. So that was an example of a story that, or it doesn't necessarily need to be something as underreported as Central African Republic to be a story that we just don't understand. It could be Russia. It could be that we don't understand Russia really well because, and I'm not saying, Miriam, that it's a mistake for us to be paying attention to the biggest story of our lifetimes. What frustrates me, apropos, is that it's all about if Trump is up or down. Every single story on the Russia story right now, Trump up or down, up or down. And that's just cable news. I'm not talking about you guys.
I literally don't watch cable news, and
Can't
my
watch,
life is
unwatchable.
enriched as a result. I highly recommend it.
Unwatchable, never mind. So, okay, back on the point. A story we need to know more, or that maybe a way to say it is that you wish you just had someone going there tomorrow. Or maybe you just cover it, maybe there isn't a wish list.
I mean, there's so many.
There's so many.
But I mean, I would say when you just put it that way, I wish I had someone going there tomorrow. I guess I would probably say Yemen.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yemen. So we had Sudarshan Raghavan from the Washington Post talk to the class via Skype. And he makes it his mission to try and get a visa to Yemen, like basically every day. Last time he was in Yemen was, I don't know, 9 months ago.
Well, you can't get in now.
A total disaster what's going on in Yemen. Definitely the most important underreported story right now in the Middle East. So, okay, here's another. What would you say to an aspiring foreign correspondent?
Go for it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, get a plane ticket.
Get a plane ticket?
Yeah, go do it. You know, I think, I think that, I would, we were talking about this a little bit at lunch, and being more pragmatic about it. I think get a plane ticket, and while I would not encourage, and I won't take your reporting from a conflict zone, there are a lot of other places in the world that are underreported, and it's from a pragmatic standpoint, it's a good idea to get yourself to one of those places and start offering reporting because there'll be a need for it, and you can make a mark.
I agree, but I think that's also hard because automatically you get a certain type of person, someone who can afford to do that, someone who can afford to live that way. So, I mean, I was privileged. It's basically what I did, but I very much understand that a lot of people who want to be and should be foreign correspondents can't take that route. It's hard.
I don't know, maybe I'm a little old-fashioned. I feel like learn the craft. Learn how to be a reporter. Learn, maybe going overseas is the way to do it. Maybe staying right here, and there's an awful lot happening in this country, and in some ways,
Like
what's happening?
Yeah, like what's happening, Michael? What's happening?
Well, you can dive into race relations. You can dive into the relationship between power, the police, and communities. You can it is as interesting as it has ever been here, and it is accessible. And because of digital outlets and social media, there's an opportunity to be published. I also think there's something to be said for working with really good editors.
So this is something that I say a lot, right? Students in the classroom, get your reps. Get your reps. Go work at the San Jose Mercury News. Go work at a local newspaper like the Half Moon Bay Review. We had Nicholas Casey, who's I guess, is he still technically the Venezuela correspondent? He's in Colombia.
He was always the Andes bureau chief, and he still is.
So, but he's in Colombia now, right? He was banned, or?
Well, we're working on that.
Right. So the point is, he Skyped in. We studied his work, and he grew up here in Redwood City in a trailer off 101, and he went to Stanford, and his first job was at the Half Moon Bay Review. And so, Caitlin, where are you? The Half Moon Bay Review. And, then he went to the Wall Street Journal, and then he went and became a foreign correspondent. So there are these various paths to these jobs. The parachute didn't start that way. That's the way Miriam and I started. But can you still work your way up, though? Or is that over, that find a mentor at a small newspaper, then go to the foreign desk? I mean, international desk. You know, it's trickier.
Good, we're making progress here. Look, I think there's all different kinds of paths. I look at the correspondence that we have, and some came up very traditional ways, working at smaller news organizations, larger news organizations. You know, Nick cut his teeth at the Wall Street Journal, and he found it somewhat constraining because they have a particular way of producing their report. And he found that the New York Times, he had more freedom to do what he wanted to do. In his first year out, he won a Polk Award, and he's done extraordinary work. Some people are coming to us from non-traditional avenues that we didn't used to. You know, I never would have hired directly to a foreign correspondent before. Normally, we'd want you to kind of learn the Times a little bit, spend some time there. I did. That's what I did. I was a foreign correspondent for the LA Times and then worked in Metro. The Times has not been hiring the way it once did in Metro. So we have turned more and more towards outside hires. But there's different paths. I don't know. The only thing I would say to you is don't let anyone tell you who you are and what you can do. Figure it out for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right, so we only have about 6 minutes left. So let's talk about the biggest story in the country, in the world, in our sleep, in our night. No. So just, I mean, you are all having deal with this story every day, even though, I mean, it's happening in Washington, but it's an international story because it's Russia, right? So just talk us through what that's like right now and your take on it, the whole thing. Miriam, you want to go?
Well, it's not just because Russia, right?
Of course, no, but I'm trying to make it relevant to the...
No, I mean, it's extraordinary aside from the Russia aspect, which is, you know, absolutely huge, is anytime he does anything, it ricochets across the world. So, well, okay, this tangentially involves Russia, but when he...
We can just talk about Trump, fine.
But when he... when he starts leaking classified intelligence to the Russians in the Oval Office, then that has repercussions about how partner intelligence agencies are going to carry on their relationships going forward. So I don't know. It's been just a crazy head-spinning chase. But I think it's incredibly exciting, and there's fantastic journalism happening, particularly at the New York Times and the Washington Post. Like every day, it's just like an incredible, I mean, it's horrifying because it always happens, like, because they're print, they have deadlines. Mm-hmm. So it keeps on happening at like 5 p.m., you know, which is horrible, but it's also just, it's fantastic, and, you know, it's one of the things that gives me faith in this country, that aside from all the civic activism and the other institutions that you see rising up to the challenge of this president, you know, you really have some of the best journalism that we've seen in decades existing to make sure that he doesn't have unrestrained power. It's extraordinary.
Thoughts on the Trump story and how it's consuming your lives, and also how we deal with lies and BS as reporters, maybe. Also, if we can touch on that before we wrap, too.
I mean, like I said before, facts matter a great deal. And I mean, one of the things that maybe you wouldn't be as aware of, but I think the way it's changing for us is that immediately after the election, we made a decision to create a separate part of the newsroom that is essentially just the conflicts group. All they do is conflicts. That's all they do. And basically, I was like, look, I'll give you one of my reporters. I'll take her off of what she was doing, and she just goes to this group. And obviously the business desk, they gave more than one, and other teams. And so we basically sacrificed personnel to say this is going to be so important, and let's maybe we're going to be doing this for 3 months, maybe we're going to be doing this for 6 months, maybe we're going to do this for God knows how long. But this is something we have to do. And what it has led to, which is, I think, a positive, is just that because of the nature of these stories, they don't fit into neat little boxes. I mean, when a conflicts team starts looking into something and it's a really, let's say maybe it's more of a business story, but then all of a sudden the business story has a part of the story is maybe going to best be told in China or in Turkey or in Azerbaijan or somewhere else, then it becomes something that requires the international desk to become part of it as well. And so what it's really doing is, what do you do with a problem like Trump? I mean, it changes the way you think about, how your newsroom works. And it's leading to a lot more collaboration across the newsroom in different pockets, which, this is one thing. I think there are conversations being had and teamwork happening that maybe, wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Michael?
Jared Kushner's family is trying to sell visas to investors in China. The deposed Mr. Flynn was on the payroll of the Turkish government, and he didn't disclose it. Mr. Trump has a relationship with 4 hotels in India that may already, because of his involvement, have him violating the emoluments clause of the Constitution. It's not just about the direct connection, but it's Mr. Trump, his family, his inner circle, who have business relationships. We've not seen his taxes. We don't know where the money has come from, and it's just incredibly complicated and incredibly interconnected. But can I digress for a second here? Because you keep saying something.
What?
You keep saying something.
For me? I don't.
Yeah. So I realize that this may sound heretical for me to say this. The New York Times is a news organization that publishes on multiple platforms. And one of the, you can laugh, but the entire way the newsroom has been re-engineered is to accommodate this. And it is very difficult to convince people of this. It is, yes, we produce a newspaper that is the finest newspaper in the world.
I love it. Look, I'm carrying it everywhere. I lug it in my bag.
You published the scoops earlier.
Don't make me
than
love it.
I think we do. And we're trying, we actually have to check things before we news alert them. But
I wasn't gonna
right
go
under the
there.
wire, got it right there.
I wasn't
But
gonna.
anyway,
I
I wasn't
there?
referring to BuzzFeed, by the way.
That was a low blow, Michael.
No, I didn't mean
Great
BuzzFeed.
alerts.
I didn't mean. No, we're not quite as
Talk
good
about
as
that in the lobby later.
Anyway.
In the alley.
No, but really, like you talk about how things have changed. When I started working as an editor, the mornings were very busy giving assignments, and the evenings were crazy because we received, correspondence would file, and we would hurry to get things done on deadline and then post them. The early versions of stories were relatively modest, and now the entire process, the assembly line process of producing the news has shifted to accomplish what Will had said, which is to give you what you want, when you want, how you want it. What's the #1 podcast in the country right now? #1 on iTunes is The Daily, produced by that newspaper, the New York Times. The 360 video thing that you talk about that we do with Samsung.
Yeah.
Every single day we produce a 360 video.
How many
Every
people
day.
how many people are watching it?
I don't know. I don't look at it. No, we do. No, but
Do they know how to put Google Cardboard
take a
in
look.
the phone?
Take a look at the extraordinary piece that is up now. That is a data visualization of the Antarctic ice shelf melting. Go look at it on your phone. Most people are consuming news on their phones. They have a very personal, intimate relationship with their phones, and we want to reach you on your phone. So, anyway, sorry. But you keep referring to us as a newspaper. We're a news organization.
Well, with that, we are just about out of time, and I thought I'd close with another quote. You're allowed to kick with a quote. You can't lead with a quote, but you can kick with a quote. From our friend Anthony Shadid. And it was when he was wrestling in this interview, which I encourage you all to go back and listen, in 2012, about the was it worth it question and the stresses he was causing his family doing the kind of work that he loved and did, the preeminent, I think, Middle East reporter of our time. And he said, he was talking about Syria, and he said, quote, "I think what we do is worthwhile and what we do is important. And there's so fewer people who do it these days than when I started 15 years ago as a foreign correspondent that I think it takes on even more importance, especially given the events that are happening around us." So with that, I want to thank you all for coming. Please join me in thanking our panelists.